So one of the concepts that you are very interested in is this idea of iconoclasm, and where there seems to be this war that is being fought between the love of images and making images, and that then becoming called idolatry, and becoming and this tendency to break the nose off sculptures, to destroy the sculptures and tear them down, and we don't know what we've lost because of these tendencies, and the image, which is maybe less precise maybe than language, or than but it is more evocative, it's more accessible to the average person. So there's this process that's going on, and I know that you have pointed to 20th century abstraction and a lot of things as being examples of this kind of iconoclasm, as that there's a similarity in impulse towards not allowing images or trying to limit their power, or this idea, but that images have come through, and stories have been told through images nonetheless, through more popular forms of art, which is a very interesting idea. Do you have anything you want to talk about with this?
I tell you, it's like this is probably one of the main topics of what I'm thinking about all the time,
Yes.
But they say that it started, from an intuitive point of view, because I was always thinking, I don't like this kind of stuff today, I don't like abstraction, but why? Why I don't like it, Why something that then you're talking with people, nobody likes it, but then is getting proposed as the main thing, today, through a lot of, excuses like, the evolution of the language, this and that, all this kind of things, and then you see that it's not true, it's just ridiculous, because there's tons of people who are making figurative painting and sculpture, figurative sculpture today, 10 years ago, 50 years ago, but still, you have to love Jason Pollock. And I never liked him, I never liked the Rothko. I know there are people who are crying in front of Rothko, probably also because they read too many books, and people said, oh, you have to cry in front of Rothko, probably, but to me, it means anything. The thing, absolutely nothing. So I was always trying to explain why this thing all of a sudden became so important, And then you look the art history, you see that it's not so clean, everything, Things are a little bit more complicated. You start to see these amazing sculptures of ancient Greeks and Rome, and then all of a sudden there's nothing anymore. How is it possible? They were making the most exquisite, amazing, fantastic sculptures ever in the 3rd century of the Common Era, and then in the 4th, they are all crooked and fucked up. How is it possible, this thing? What's happened there? So it happened that there has been an intrusion, or maybe the affirmation of a different culture which didn't want to have anything to do with images, because it's written in the 2nd commandment of the Bible. That's it, it's super easy. And then you see that during the centuries, the West, I came to the conclusion that the Western culture is in sort of way, this main characteristic is to be sick. Is the culture with a huge disease, and sometimes is getting back to his original health, that is Greek and Roman, the Greek and Roman roots, and all the rest is like, not because of geography, because I was born here, because to me that, we know how immense were those two cultures, not just in terms of architecture and painting and sculpture, but also in terms of philosophy and mathematics, everything. We were like really unbelievable from every point of view. We took so much out of it. But all of a sudden, there is a huge crisis, the Middle Age, And then, there is no sculptures, no paintings, etc., no culture. People went backward for centuries, they didn't know anything about science anymore. This was all about, this idea of God, let's say. I'm characterizing in a very gross way, but more or less, just think about, the fact that Archimedes invented the calculus. It got invented again in the 17th century by Newton and Leibniz.
Yeah.
And Archimedes already invented it more than 1,000 years before. You know, so it's being discovered recently. You know, they found out some pipers.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
he invented the whole thing. He invented by sectioning, you know, squares, smaller, and was able to calculate the area
under the curve.
Yeah, exactly the same thing, but thousands of years before, you know, 1,000 and something years before, which is pretty impressive, you know. So there was like such an advancement, and all of a sudden, falling down, you know. And then, you know, the Renaissance was kind of a sort of way getting back to this healing back, you know. Then, you know, to me, the Reformation, okay, science was keep going, but from the point of view of the arts, we were going backward, in my opinion. You know, we never went to that level. You know, of between 15th, 16th, early 17th century. You know, so it was like a really going backward, in my opinion. So anyway, when you start to see all these contradictions in history, you have to start to figure out why this thing happened. You know, so what was the element that was making things going one direction or another direction? And the main element, in my opinion, is like this religious. But it's not even religious. This principle of representing the world in terms of an abstract code, that is the alphabet.
Yeah.
You don't have this kind of progress in China. You don't have this kind of progress in Japan. They are just in the West. You know, this abolition of images or images. You know, so in China, in Japan, you have like in India. You don't have this problem because it's never been introduced the alphabet in terms in Western terms.
So you think it's that because the written word was more
the written word,
more pictorial.
It was like the fact that the written word was considered the principle of a new form of religiosity, which considered God as completely distant from the world, and considered the world doesn't contain the divinity anymore. You know, so that is coming when you start to project all the knowledge in a system of codex, you know. When the religiosity is expressed by images, you are still connected with the world. So the West is always through this dynamism, you know, like the images have to be reinforced in order to contrast the power of the written word, which then is trying to destroy the images. You know, there is all
like a battle of memes.
Exactly. It's a battle of two.
Not memes in the social media sense, but the Richard Dawkins sense of the meme that is.
Yeah, the original roots, let's say, cultural roots. And for example, you know, if you read, there are some books that are very interesting. You know, the Besancon book, the Forbidden Image, or the Under the Hammer.
That was one of the ones you made me read before I came.
It's a hard read. It's a pretty heavy book.
It's a heavy book, but it's interesting.
It's extremely interesting. But then, you know, there is another one that is extremely interesting by James Simpson that is called Under the Hammer. That is all about, you know, the East. He's an Australian guy also.
Okay.
Extremely, I think it's one of the best book written about that topic. And he's talking about, you know, the Anglo-Saxon history of iconoclasm, starting from the affirmation of Protestantism in England, you know, until the 19th century. It's interesting because it shows how the concept of iconoclasm transformed from being something about destroying the images in something even worse, in transforming the concept of the appreciation of the image. Before the image had this, before Enlightenment, you know, the images have this kind of religious connection with people, you know. While during the 18th century, in order to limit the power of the images have to become a source of aesthetic appreciation. And so you, for example, in the United States, it's very interesting, you know, because you see how people appreciate the painting, you know. For example, if I see a beautiful painting by Rubens, for example, I'm first of all like, wow, overwhelmed. I don't know where to look, you know. You have this kind of mass of colors and lines and forms that they are really, and then you start to figure out what is the meaning, and then you start to disconnect the different levels and start to see what this figure, what the landscape, etc., etc. You know? But first you enjoy this huge rapture, in a sort of way, created by the image. Then, you know, in America, most of the times, you know, people immediately start to deconstruct the image. They say, oh, that red. You know, it's like a painting that's 10 meters by 5 meters. They say, oh, that red. Oh, that little blue in the point, of that line, That's the thing that they do to defend themselves against image.
Against the whole impact.
Exactly,
The whole thing.
exactly.
Everything having an integrated impact on you, that
Exactly.
everything works together.
And that is coming from this transformation of this rupture that the image is able to induce into appreciation that is typical of Anglo-Saxon culture, particularly in United States right now, because the Puritan root is still extremely strong. Of course, there's been a sort of progressive secularization, maybe in England, Australia, etc. But in America, it's still extremely strong, and it is a culture which really needs to get to defend itself against images. In the United States, the images are into museums. Whatever is outside the museum is not even art; it has to be into the museum. Because in that way, you have this sort of say you are self-defended against the power of the image. Art, the word art applied on painted images is meaning images which are not able anymore to exert their own power on me. That's the thing, In fact, it's funny, because I remember I was discussing with somebody on Facebook, I don't remember what we were talking about, and I was saying, because art made by the Persians in the 5th century before, and he was saying, but that's not even art. I said, what? How can you say that? Oh, that's not art. Art is what is in the museums. Art has been started to be made after the 50s. How can you say that? But I was really impressed and extremely interested to see that, There has been a complete transformation of the concept of art based on iconoclastic principle, meaning art is the image which can harm me, practically. And subconsciously, that's the idea, practically. It's into the museum, you have to pay the ticket to go to see it. It doesn't interfere with the life of the city. It's just there, So that's art.
Interesting. Okay, so before we go on and talk more about what you're doing in your work and your process and how your process has evolved and these things, I just wanted to ask one last question on this topic, which is, we'll come back and look at this in 10 years' time, but what do you think is the big trend? What do you think is going to happen with the art world and with, are you optimistic from the point of view of as someone who's making figurative sculptures and paintings, are you optimistic about the way that you will be received going forward, or do you feel that there's how do you see this?
My point is this, I think that today, but almost today particularly, I think that there's no way to say what's going to happen. For example, I'm just doing what I end up to do is I'm just doing my part. It's a complete bet. I don't know if what I'm doing going to be important or not. I'm just doing it because it's my responsibility to do it.
Yes.
On the other side, I see people younger than me, like you, for example, or other people who are interested about the same kind of topics, and it's kind of surprising because maybe 10 years ago that would have been much more difficult to see other people interested about the same kind of topics that independently people are cultivating, but mostly younger people, younger generations, because if you want, after the idea that painting was supposed to die, and today there are still a lot of people who try to paint, who are trying to study the classics, who are trying to study the Renaissance and also the academic artists of the 19th century, which I personally don't like so much, but at the same time is also extremely interested in the entire, an entire period of time that's been completely neglected now is coming back, So this makes me think that we don't give me some trust, but at the same time, I don't know what's going to happen because, for example, yesterday one sculpture by Jeff Koons got sold at the auction for $91 million. Of course, it's a completely manipulated operation. As usual, it was bought by a dealer. Probably gonna sell it again. Probably people were putting money in order to make that thing having so much value in order to sell other things. The usual thing, complete market manipulation. But at the same time, that kind of work is extremely powerful. Being a Venice Biennial, last week. It was extremely boring, nothing new, extremely meaningless, as usual. It's a good place to go to meet people, to make your own business, to see friends face to face, but then in terms of the exhibition is absolutely nothing.
You didn't feel moved, you didn't feel
there's
excited.
absolutely nothing. But even what before you could have felt, there were some new trends coming up, some direction. There's no direction. It's all suspended into nothingness, Then, you check on Instagram, you see an artist like Koons, that he has 2 million followers. He sold for, I don't remember how much, one of his own things. Banksy is like 5.7 million followers, So you see, there is happening something huge. But I don't like the art they do at all, I don't really care about that stuff. But that's really huge, when you start to see how the social media are completely changing the system, So there's so many different things happening in the same moment. So in the past I would have think, okay, I want to get into one of these movements, try to, but in the end I think the only thing, at least for me, to do for painters is really to go as much as possible into the roots of what painting is today, not trying to be like a caveman of 40,000 years ago, but at the same time rediscover that principle, and try to give answers of the topics of today through those principles,
Yes.
So, understanding that the painting, sculpture and architecture are material media. They are staying in the space.
Yes.
They are made of material things, like pigments on a piece of canvas or on a wall, Consider that's the main thing, And occupying as
and you experience them with your body.
And you experience with your body,
with
with other people.
Yeah.
That you are not escaping a different world. You are here now in front of these extremely powerful images who stays into a place, And understanding all the limitations are supposed to come from the fact that these images are still images, that is the root of their power, practically. Because they occupy a slice of this world.
Yes.
All we are doing today in the computer is things that in few years gonna completely disappear. Nothing gonna remain. So it's meaning all this world we are living right now, all the talks, information, these are gonna completely disappear because the magnetic support decay. You have to constantly copying the things. But probably most of what we are doing with these computers is gonna be done by other media, and so all of this is going to disappear. Nobody going to be able to get access to those information. So that's why sculpture, painting, architecture is still in a sort of way the main stuff, because all the world has to converge into those things and occupy a piece of the world if has been relevant until now.
Yeah. That it's not, you're not going to lose a bronze. You can't just delete it easily.
No,
you can melt it down, but it's harder to.
Yeah, but a piece of marble is like 3,000, 5,000 years.
You stub your toe on those suckers. Yeah. So I thought firstly we could just talk a little bit about your process and how it's changed over the time that you've been working. So what type of thing you were doing originally, and how you were maybe your early training, and then how your process for painting has evolved.
Okay, so my process, as usual, as I said before, is something that started from, let's say, trying to get as close as possible to the paintings I was very impressed about, when I was a little kid, early Renaissance and early Baroque.
Yeah.
So I was always attracted by that, I was always trying to figure out how to get close to that, So that's why, I'm using the most traditional kind of method as possible. There's meaning sketches at the beginning, as I said before, not just to represent what I have in mind, but to enhance what I have in mind, to activate imagination, let's say. All these sketches. Then after the sketches, I inserted a certain point of my life, when I was probably 15, 16, making of sculptures, making little sculptures in order to understand the volumes, etc., etc. And then, until a certain point I was working with the real model, putting them in the position, etc., etc. But that has a lot of limitations because I wasn't able to put the models in the right position to make a drawing. So lasting, it was taking like 2 hours to make one drawing, out of which then I was making the painting. Then I started to use also photography because I was sure enough that I was able to set up the whole composition without the use of photography. So photography for me was just to take information, to get information from the reality, but not to set the structure.
Yes.
The structure was always made through sketches and the three-dimensional models.
Right.
And then finally, being able to overcome the use of photography through the use of
3D models.
3D models.
Yeah.
Practically. So as you can see, I was always trying to enhance the methodology, trying to avoid, trying to eliminate, trying to resolve problematic that were inherent in the methodology, And now I think I have a good, let's say, pipeline out of which I'm making my own paintings. Of course, at a certain point, there is the making of the paintings themselves,
Yes.
And the making of the painting itself is very much based on the very traditional system that is like, let's say, monochromatic, grisaille underpainting, and then, glazes and half transparent glazes and transparent glazes, and then highlights, retouches, all these kind of things. It's extremely traditional, let's say.
Yeah.
Besides, I put in this factor of a digital. I started to think about that in the early 80s when I saw the movie Tron. I was thinking, okay, at this point I have to try to use these tools, but it was impossible at that time. They were like super expensive. Then early 90s.
When you saw that, it clicked for you that this was the same type of maybe aesthetic or way of seeing the world that was in the sort of Renaissance, very perspective building.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I knew already all the drawings made by Piero, Francesca, or Paolo, Uccello, these people, these kind of relatively simple geometric objects, but processed through perspective, through central perspective. So those drawings were wireframes practically. They were like really made by simplifying the shapes of these objects into polygonal meshes and delineated with a wireframe. And then when I saw Tron, I was thinking, wow, this is exactly the same thing. So I saw the coincidence. I saw the fact that the beginning of the new digital revolution, which many people didn't perceive as such at that time. We were thinking, okay, it's just one of the many possible visual effects. But for me, by seeing that and the Renaissance drawings, I was thinking, no, this is like really something serious, something huge going to come out of this,
Yes.
And so I was thinking, I want to appropriate this kind of stuff, It was extremely difficult because it was extremely expensive. Also, growing in a very marginal area, very provincial, I didn't have access to anything, so it was very difficult. Then, at the beginning of the 90s, in collaboration with a friend of mine who had a computer, we started to work on a big painting. It was like 15 meters large by 5, and he was doing all the work with the program. The program was called Stratavision. And to make something that today I would do like in 2 days, at that time we took like more than 1 year. It was super complicated.
Wow.
Yeah. In the 90s, in the end of the 90s, I was able finally to have my own computer and using soft image, which was like the first kind of approachable program, which was allowing you to do a lot of stuff, And then, I got into Maya, ZBrush, etc., etc.
Sure.
That was like the whole excursus, let's say.
Right, great. So, one question just to ask, you were talking about the grisaille. I've seen you paint on a red ground. I've seen you paint on a grey, a very mid-tone grey with dark and light. And here you're working on white. Can you explain what your reasoning is for the different?
No, because I'm constantly changing.
Yeah, I know.
I'm constantly changing inside a very limited territory, let's say.
Yes.
Because I was trying, when I was in Los Angeles, when you saw my studio, I was working on these red backgrounds, made with caput mortuum, and then I was working with the white on it,
Yeah.
and I was trying to get closer to a certain early 17th century kind of style, Then I got to this more gray kind of backgrounds.
Yeah.
So they are all variation of the same thing. There's no really a reason. Now I'm doing these things in black and white on the white background because I'm gonna glaze the whole thing after on it with the half transparent yellow and black, Indian yellow and black.
Right.
So gonna be kind of greenish,
Yes.
And I found out is a very good background for a moment,
Right.
So, but beside that, I also changed things in the process.
Okay.
So for example, now I'm working with more saturated colors.
Okay.
I'm using a lot of, instead of titanium white, I'm using zinc white.
Yeah.
So, there's constant variation.
Okay.
Because
So
as
so you're trying to keep that higher chroma in
Yes. Because I think with painting you never learn, you never finish to learn,
Sure.
It's a constant, but also because unfortunately we are coming out from a historical period in which a lot of things got forgotten, methodology particularly,
Yes. Yeah.